Welcome everybody to the League of Women Voters online discussion. I'm Betsy DeWitt. I'm president of the nonpartisan Brookline League of Women Voters. And footnote for those who are interested, last Friday's discussion on ballot questions is now available online at BIG, Brookline Access Television. So if you want to watch it, if you missed it, you now can. And for the record, the current program is also being recorded. Tonight, we are renewing a Brookline League of Women Voters tradition, an annual opening meeting, hosting a speaker on a topic of local community interest, in this case, bicycling in an urban environment. Our speaker, Peter Firth, will tell us about bicycling for everyone in Brookline. He's a professor of civil engineering at Northeastern University with degrees from MIT, who specializes in transit planning. And happily, that includes pedestrians and bicycling. As a former resident, he knows Brookline well. And of particular personal interest to me, he has visited and written about bicycling in Amsterdam, where it is the main means of transit. And having been there and nearly been run over by the bicycles, including having rented one for my own use, I know how important it is to have everything organized in order to accommodate bicycles. And also, just speaking personally, in my youth, I regularly rode my bicycle to high school and out and all around town, not Brookline. Locally, we're seeing more bicycle and other personal wheeled travel, especially where there are bicycle lanes. However, automobiles continue to be the main transportation vehicle and dominate the streets, presenting challenges for cyclists. As we are all dealing with different levels of climate change, we look for alternatives to gasoline-fueled travel, and that should mean better conditions for bicycling. And now I am pleased to welcome Peter Firth, who has experience designing safe roads for foot and pedal-driven travel. We look forward to hearing his thoughts and recommendations. And everybody, questions are welcome. Put them in the chat at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Thank you all. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Betsy. Hopefully you can see my big question. Is bicycling a real option for Brookline? As Betsy said, I'm really happy to be speaking here. My mother was a longtime member of the League of Women Voters. And I lived in Brookline for 10 years. I lived on Pleasant Street. I have a couple of my children went to Brookline High School. One also went to the Lincoln School and what was then called the Devotion School. And I was on the Brookline Bike Committee. I was on the Brookline Transportation Board. I know some of you who are watching, and I still have a lot of friends there. So yeah, glad to share with you that I pose this as a question. Is bicycling a real option for Brookline? Before I lived in Brookline, I lived in Milton. I was on the bike advisory committee there. And one of the town officials who was responsible for transportation in that town, he heard that we started a bicycle advisory committee and we were trying to promote bicycling. And he came to he spoke up at a meeting that I was at, I forget which one, and he said, "You want safe bicycling? I'll give you safe bicycling. When you go this summer, when you go on vacation, go to Cape Cod, take your bikes down there and go ride on the rail trail. And then when you come home, put your bike in the garage and leave it there until next summer. That's the only safe bicycling you'll ever see." He took the position that safe bicycling was simply impossible in his town and was not interested in any attempts to promote bicycling or to try to move toward a safer way. So, you know, that is a possibility that maybe that's the right thing. Or maybe the right thing is that Brookline should make bicycling safe and available as a real mode of transportation. So I'm going to present some ideas to see if I can convince you that I think it really should be a real option for Brookline. So I'm glad to hear, Betsy, that you visited the Netherlands. I know probably several of you watching have, and no doubt many of you haven't. If you go there, you'll see people riding bikes. And it's not sportsters riding bikes, though sometimes you see them on weekends. You see just normal people. Everybody's out there riding bikes. People are riding to school and to work. Families are out riding. Kids, once they're old enough to cross the street, 8, 10 years old, they're out riding independently. Seniors are riding. People are riding for errands. The schools there are no school buses in the whole country. Everybody is expected to either walk to school. For elementary, most walk because they're close. But once you get to middle and high school, you're just expected to ride your bike to school. The train stations, half the people coming to the train are coming by bike. And so this is what you see there that's bike parking at the Amsterdam train station. If I could show a picture to show you the 40,000 bicycle parking spaces at the Utrecht train station, I would, but they're underground, so it's hard to show that. So bicycling is real transportation in the Netherlands. They have winter over there. It gets dark. It's cold and rainy. They don't get too much snow, but it's cold and it rains a lot, and they keep on riding. So there's a transportation array. If you live in a Dutch city, you can drive a car. They have really nice roads. You can take trains and buses. You can ride a bicycle. You can walk. They've got this full array there. The array in most US cities is just missing the bike part. I mean, it's legal. You're allowed to ride a bike, but it isn't really provided for in the way that driving and walking are. I know in some communities, walking isn't provided for well, nor is transit. But in almost no American city is bicycling provided for in the way that we citizens demand, that we'd expect. I want a safe route. I don't want to have to risk my life to get from here to there. What we've grown up with, the world that we grew up in, if we grew up here in the US, is a world in which there were basically two options for getting around. And I said private transportation. There also often is a public transportation option. But for other than public transportation, it was either walk or auto. And so I've put them here in this matrix in which you see on one side, it could be either human powered or motor driven. And then across the top, it could have no wheels or it could be with wheels. And, what the human race has just inherently is the first cell. We don't have wheels and we're human powered. And what we found that gets us around and dominates cities is this other option, automobile. The human powered, now that's healthy and non-polluting. Whereas motor driven, well, it pollutes and it injures people. It kills people when there are crashes. However, wheels, man, they're fast. I mean, without wheels, what can you do? Run? That's exhausting. And you get real sweaty, and it's hard to carry much of anything when you're running. So that's just not a practical way to get anywhere. But if you add bicycling to the matrix, it marries the best of both. Like walking, it's human powered, so it's healthy and not polluting. But like a car, it uses this incredible invention of the wheel so that the momentum that you've gained from one step, or I should say one pedal stroke, isn't immediately lost the way it is with walking. So you can go 3 or 4 times as fast on a bike as you can on foot with the same effort. Now, you can't go as fast as a car on most streets, but you can practically cover in a normal commuting distance, you can cover a big enough distance to get to a lot of workplaces, almost any store that you need to get to, a lot of other activities. So autos, I'm not against autos. There's a place in our transportation matrix for autos. My wife and I own an auto. We like to go to the woods and go hiking, and we like to go a distance a little further than we want to go on a bike. So yes, for a lot of reasons, autos can be good. They've given us great freedom and economic opportunity. But let's not deny the cost that autos have brought to society. First, there are many costs to our health in deaths and injuries. 40,000 deaths per day, more than 100 per day. I mean, if a plane crashed and killed 100 people, that would be on the headlines. Well, a plane is crashing every day and killing 100 people. We've just gotten used to it. For our young people, age say 12 to 20, or 12, even 25, traffic deaths are the leading cause of death. Well, at least they were until a few years ago when guns overtook them. But they're a close second. We're losing these young people that we love. Then another cost to our health is the lack of exercise. When humans were made to just get exercise by going places, getting around. To go someplace, you had to exercise. Give a person a car, and now they don't have to. And the result is obesity, high rates of diabetes, heart disease. And people have studied bike commuters versus non-bike commuters. Over a 5-year period, the bike commuters 50% less risk of heart disease, 50% less risk of cancer, of course, less diabetes, much healthier weight. And then a third cost to our health is in the air pollution that our cars produce.
Peter,
yes?
Just a quick correction. It's your slide says 40,000 deaths per day, but you meant per year.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. 40,000.
And I have to thank someone who put a note in the chat with a correction.
Yeah, 40,000 per day. That would be
that's a lot. Too many.
Yeah, okay, sorry. 40,000 per year. Thank you, Betsy. Yeah, so air pollution, the particulates and the ozone precursors that come out of our tailpipes create high rates of asthma and other respiratory illnesses that shorten a lot of people's lives and take a lot of lives. This slide shows how the graph shows how many calories the average person uses up per day when walking and bicycling, not for exercise, but for transportation, just to get places. You see the USA on the left, 18 that we use up walking, and only two bicycling. You see the Netherlands on the right, a good deal more walking, and 35 bicycling. That difference in the cycling calories there between 35 and 2, 33 calories per day, I've calculated it. Over the course of a year, that's 2 pounds. That's 2 pounds of fat that they're not putting on and that we're putting on because we're just not getting the exercise that humans need. Auto dependence has other costs on society too. There's the cost of inequity and segregation because yeah, autos give us a lot of freedom and economic opportunity, but only if you're wealthy enough to own an auto and pay for the insurance and operate. And when you have an auto-oriented development, a mall out in the suburbs or something like that, or even homes out in the suburbs, they become exclusive. You just can't live there if you don't have a car, and that's become it's a not so subtle way of segregation. Another cost is to our children. Children who can get places on their own, walking and bicycling. They develop with more confidence, they learn better, they're happy. I lived in Holland for a year. My children at the time were age 4 to 14. And they were just so happy riding their bikes everywhere. The city was a playground because there were safe routes to ride everywhere. They'd go exploring here, go anywhere they wanted. Auto dependence destroys our urban fabric because Autos take up so much space for parking, and the roads take up so much space for travel that it kills walkability. We love walkable cities. On our vacation, we like to go and walk around Paris and walk around any European city. It's so nice. It's because people are coming into the city not by car, and that allows for this beautiful urban fabric. And now, maybe only in the last 10 years, people have begun to give a lot of serious thought to climate change. And if you're a state like Massachusetts, which doesn't have a lot of heavy industry, steel and coal and whatnot, 40% or more of our greenhouse gas is from the transportation sector. And most of that is from just private transportation, you and me driving around. And if we're serious about combating climate change, we have to change the way we get around. So why not bike? Well, one objection that people say, it's just too far to bike. And yes, for some trips, it probably is too far to bike. But for a lot of our trips, no. Here, this trip distribution graph shows that more than 50% of our trips are under 4 miles in length. This is an average throughout the US. In Brookline and in greater Boston, it's even less because of we are a denser city. And on a bicycle, it's just easy to go 3 to 6 miles, depending on your fitness. And if you get a bike with an e-bike, a bike where there's a small electric motor that provides an assist as you pedal, people can go 7 to 11 miles. E-bikes have become so popular in the Netherlands now, they're outselling regular bikes. At first, they were being purchased only by old people, and anybody who wasn't old thought, this is it'll make me look weak if I buy one. But they've gotten over that hump now, and everybody's getting them, and they're just traveling further. There are other objections. Why not bike? People often tell me, I sweat too much. These are always people who think of bicycling as an exercise, and yeah, if you want to get a super workout, of course, you're going to sweat. But with bicycling, to get someplace, just slow down. I sweated quite a bit when I was riding 14 miles an hour. I slowed down to 12, 11 miles an hour, and there's just no sweat. You create a breeze as you ride, unlike walking. Another objection people give is, but what about the rain and the cold? You can only ride in good weather. And the answer to that is, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. Think of skiers. They deliberately go out there when it's, 10 degrees and a howling wind, but they wear the right clothing, and so they do fine. So yeah, you wear wool socks, you put on windbreaker pants or rain pants when it's raining, along with a rain jacket, and you can ride in the rain just like I rode today, yesterday. But there is one main objection that people give about riding a bike, and that is traffic. It's dangerous, and it makes it stressful for me to ride. If you look at these 3 images, the first one's a quiet street in Brookline. Yeah, I'd be happy to ride on that quiet local street. The one below it, now that's a bike path along a busy road in the Netherlands, but you can see you're completely separate from the traffic. Yeah, there's no traffic stress there. And then the biggest picture, that's Beacon Street in Brookline. There the first few bicyclists you see, they're kind of coming into the intersection. But if you look back a little further, you see some bicyclists between a parking lane and traffic in multiple lanes. And a lot of people look at that and say, forget it. If I have to do that, I'm just leaving my bike at home. I'm not going to ride. And that's a reasonable position to take, because who wants to risk their life when you've got other options? Now, I'm a civil engineer, transportation engineer, and when I hear that the chief objection is traffic danger, it's traffic stress, I smile. I said, oh, this is good news because I can't control the weather, you know. I can't control where you have to haul your kids to from here to there, or whether you need a car for work, but we own the streets. If you're a municipality, and when you're the League of Women Voters, you vote for, you know, who's going to run your cities. Yeah, if the main problem is the traffic danger, we can do something about that because we own the streets. And so all over the Netherlands, on the busy roads, they put these cycle tracks. In Vancouver, British Columbia, you can see there that they put a nice cycle track on a road between the sidewalk and the carriageway. And Brookline has recently done the same thing. Now this one is on Route 9 and in the Gateway East area. And in not just Europe, but in America as well, they've proven it. If you build it, they will ride. In Dutch cities, bicycle ridership was declining rapidly as people became wealthier and they bought cars. The roads became more dangerous. People are switching to cars, and every planner predicted that within a few years, bicycling will go extinct, just as it did in many other European cities. But no, after 1973, they saw the energy crisis. They saw their way of life was being taken away by the auto. They started building safe bicycling paths, and now more than 25% of trips in that country are made by bike. Not just work trips, all trips. In Montreal, a city official visited the Netherlands in 1988. He came back and told his engineers, do the same thing here. And they've made protected bike lanes like that. The cars that you see in the picture next to that woman bicycling, that's a row of parked cars. So they're just riding between the sidewalk and this row of parked cars. In the US, the leading cities at first were Boulder and Portland. But actually, they weren't great examples for other cities to follow. Boulder became a great bicycling city, but it has all these creeks that have floodplains that you can't build in. And they could build beautiful bike paths on those creeks, which went under roads and so on. Well, I mean, that's great, but it's just not something that you can copy. Portland, it has this incredible grid of in which the local streets just are straight and go on for miles. So all they had to do was take some of their local streets, divert the through traffic, and you could be riding for miles on a nice, quiet local street. So for very easily, they were able to make a good bike network. But New York City became the example that inspired us all in 2007 when they said, we're going to do what the Europeans have done. And they went against what the American guides say, and they went ahead and said, we're going to do it the safe European way. We're going to move the parking away from the curb. We're going to make a protected, separated bike lane. And when they did it, cities around the country held their breath and said, oh, you mean, wait, we've been told you can't do that. You mean we can do that? And soon afterwards, cities all over the country started making these protected bike lanes, also called cycle tracks. So hooray for bike infrastructure, but you got to beware of the cop-out. The cop-out is so-called bike facilities that still involve a high level of traffic stress. Like, you know, the first one, that's a section of Beacon Street that has since been changed to a cycle track. But before it was changed, there by St. Mary's, yeah, you want me to ride my bike in that bike lane and people are going to open their car doors. Or another example here, you see that bike symbol painted on the road. That's called a sharrow. And the ostensible purpose of the sharrow is to embolden bicyclists to just take the lane and to treat the car lane as though it's a bike lane. Well, it doesn't work. Bicyclists, you know, they just don't want to ride in the middle of a lane and block traffic and incur the wrath of cyclists, of motorists who are trying to go by. So those are high stress, level of traffic stress 3, level of traffic stress 4. No, if we want to get people to ride, we need to give them low stress. So Roger Geller, who was the bike coordinator for the city of Portland, he said around 2005 or so, he said, we've got to change the way we are building for bicyclists, because only a very small percent of our people are strong and fearless who will ride anywhere. And only about 7% of our people are what he called enthused and confident, who will ride in a bike lane on a busy road next to parked cars and so on. The vast majority are what he called interested but concerned. I'm interested in bicycling. When I go on vacation, I'd love to ride a bike. And if I could ride a bike safely to my work, I'd be very interested, but I'm concerned. Don't think it's safe. So I followed up on Roger's work and came up with this level of traffic stress metric and matched it to basically to Roger's classification. If it's high stress, level traffic stress 4, then only the strong and fearless will ride there. Others, they just stay away. The enthused and confident, they'll take level of traffic stress 3. But if we want to reach the majority, we need to have level of traffic stress 2, low stress, or even lower, 1, low enough that children want to ride. So to show you how important this is, we classified all the streets in San Jose. Our research funding was coming from an institute in San Jose. That's why we worked on San Jose. So if it's tan, that's level of stress 4. Well, I'll start with the green. If it's green, that's level stress 1. You see lots of local streets are green. Blue, level traffic stress 2. Purple, level 3. Tan is level 4. If you're strong and fearless, that's your network. You'll ride on all those. But if you're in the next group, you're only interested but concerned, well, let's take away the tan. You don't want to ride on them. And now this is your network, and you start to see, wow, there's some big gaps. You know, can you really get from here to there? And if you're like most people, you don't even want level of stress 3. You only take level of stress 2 or less. And now there's gaps everywhere, barriers everywhere. You start in a neighborhood, you ride around a few blocks, and you can't go anywhere. You just got to go back home. And if you're children and you only want level stress 1, even more. That's your network. You just can't get from here to there. Okay, let's go. I'll go back. It's marvelous to see. If we add in level stress 2, we add in level stress 3, we add in level stress 4. But now you take away those high stress roads, and that's the bike network that people say, that's where I'm willing to ride. With a geographic information system, we had it draw these islands, areas that are connected at level stress 2. And you see that with every different color is a different island. If you're in one of those islands, you can't get to the next one without riding through a high stress link, which people don't want to do. So you got to have a plan for a low stress network all over town. Well, luckily Brookline has one. This is the Brookline Green Routes Plan. It's got 2 colors of lines. The black lines are what they call the protected network. Those are higher traffic volume roads where the bikes should have protected, like cycle tracks. And then the green are lower volume roads, but still important for bikes, and it should have provisions to make it safe and low stress for riding on them. The schools are marked out there with this plan. Oh man, you got a safe route to get to every school. You got a safe route to get to any employment place in Brookline. Safe route to get to the BU Bridge, to get onto Cambridge, to get into Boston, to get wherever you want to go. So that's the Green Routes Plan. The first edition is 2008. The latest edition, 2022. It was written by the Brookline Bicycle Advisory Committee and presented to the Transportation Committee, which accepted it as a plan. And oh yeah, before I want to get to that, just imagine for yourself that there really were safe bicycling routes on all those streets. Yeah, you could get to Coolidge Corner on a bike and do your shopping there and not have to worry about the busy parking lot at Trader Joe's. You could get to the swimming pool. You can get to, kids can get to any school. Kids from South Brookline, they don't have to wait for the bus. They don't have to have this after school activities constrained by the early bus and the late bus. They can just ride. And, in 20 minutes, they're at school, in 15 minutes, depending on where they're coming from everywhere. On a Saturday or a Sunday, you want to go on a leisure ride everywhere. You can just ride everywhere. Wow. And can it be done? Yes, we can. So, we've seen that the change on Route 9 the picture above shows a one-way section of Park Street at Coolidge Corner with the treatment called contraflow. We say, well, it's one way for cars, but it doesn't have to be one way for bikes. It can be two-way for bikes. Here's a treatment that Brookline hasn't tried yet. Advisory lanes. By now, maybe 70 cities in America have done it. It's really growing. Where there isn't quite space for full bike lanes, but you might mark the equivalent of bike lanes with dashed lines. And when one car meets another car, then they just have to come into the bike lane space. Dutch cities are full of these things, and they are so low stress. They're so great. So I think that would be a great treatment for the two-way part of Park Street, for Pleasant Street, for a lot of other streets like that in Brookline. There's a plan now for a bridle path. Beacon Street, before it had all these cars on it, had trolley tracks, it had a carriage road, and it had a bridle path for horseback riding, right? And where that old bridle path was is an ideal place to put a bike path. Next to the train tracks, you just push the angled parking a little bit, you'd lose the bike lane, and that creates the space. The town is looking into it. Town meeting has allocated funds for an engineering study, and maybe in a few years we'll have a great bike path there in the middle of the Beacon Street median. Some of my students have worked on projects in using Brookline. Seniors have to do a project, so let's look at something real. We looked at Lee and Clyde Street. Could we make for safe bicycling there? And we found out, yes, the amount of traffic can be carried with no delay, full speed ahead, with traffic in one lane per direction. And then the road is now a wide road with 4 lanes. We put in a grassy median, and then we have a carriage lane, which could serve the local traffic, people to get in and out of their driveways, and bikes can ride on that because the carriage road would be a nice, quiet local street. We also looked at Hammond Street and Newton Street and found, yes, likewise, these roads don't need all the space that they have to carry their traffic. Their traffic can be carried in one lane per direction. And that would give us space for a wonderful greenway that we call the South Brookline Greenway. Presented that at Putterham Library a few years ago. So yes, we have a plan for routes all over the place, and people want to know, well, can we do it? What would it cost? So, sometimes you get a big project from the state that puts in some money, but at the level of a community, about $20 per person per year. $20 per person per year. I have friends who go skiing. Sometimes, I haven't done it in a while, sometimes my son gets me to go skiing with him. We spend about $100, and that allows us to enjoy all the trails on a mountain for a day. For $20, you could enjoy wonderful bike paths all over town for the whole year. Such a deal. I've thought about where that money should come from. Autos is where it should come from. That would amount to, since there's about, in a place like Brookline, there's about 1 car for every 2.5 people. That would amount to $50 per automobile per year. I know somebody's going to object and say, why should cars have to pay for bike infrastructure? And the answer is, it's all for cars. You see, bikes and cars and people walking, we could all coexist if we all went 3 miles an hour. We built sidewalks not so that the pedestrians would be safe. We built the sidewalks so the cars can go fast, not hitting a pedestrian. You want to drive fast on your streets? Then it's the obligation of the fast vehicle, the one that poses the danger to others, to make sure that the others are taken care of so they can drive fast. And you compare that with what we spend in subsidizing other modes of transportation. Transit, about $440 per person per year. Highway, $600. So this is small potatoes if we want to do it. And here's a difficult thing. I think this question about is bicycling right for our community? It's a quantum problem. It almost becomes a binary, just simple yes or no. It's a quantum problem because until you have a real connected network, you just don't have much. 15% of a network just ain't a network. You know, on Brookline, on Beacon Street, part of the street, there's bike lanes going inbound, but not outbound. I mean, who rides inbound and doesn't ride outbound? It just doesn't do you much good to have a section of bike lane here, a section of bike lane here, until you have a substantial part of the network complete and connected. You're just not going to see the benefit. So it really is a binary thing. Are we going to do it? We have to do it big. And that's the question. Is everyday bicycling as a normal thing that that normal people like me do, not like, I'm not saying not me, Peter, for me, you know, whoever's saying this, a normal thing that our kids do, a normal way for people to get to school, a normal way for people to get to where they're going. And is it part of our climate change solution? And if yes, then we should get to it in creating this network. And I want to close by sharing from my experience, watching what's gone on in Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Brookline. Just like there are the 5 stages of grief, there are the 5 stages of bicycle infrastructure plan. It starts with the government completely ignoring bicycling because they perceive the constituency to be a few crazies. Then, after some time, they realize it's not just a few crazies. This is an interest group that votes. I want to get their vote. So let's just do some gestures. So any place that we could stripe a bike lane, and striping costs very little money, and where it doesn't require removing anybody's parking, doesn't require removing anybody's travel lane. If we can do it for nearly no cost, sure, we'll do that. And by the way, a lot of things they give us like that are of no value, but sometimes they're pretty valuable. Then the next stage is plans, but plans that without a commitment or a budget. Like Boston made a plan in the last year of Mayor Menino's administration. He wouldn't allow a plan before his last year because he didn't want to be held to it. But so his last year, he allowed a plan to be made and explicitly says in that plan, there is no money for this. Somehow, I don't know where we'll find the money for it. In other words, it's a dream. It's not going to happen. And that's what you do when you realize, it would be politically correct for people to see me as being in favor of bicycling. So, okay, let's make a plan. I'm afraid that's that's Brookline's plan likewise. The Green Routes plan, it's a great plan, but it has no commitment. There's no budget. This is going to be done by when? In time for my grandchildren to ride or my grandchildren's grandchildren? The next stage is policies that apply to new projects. When you've got some righteous advocates who are demanding action, you say, okay, on any new projects, we'll include bicycle facilities. So this is good. But if we wait for new projects to renew our streets, it's going to be about 75 years before everything gets done, because we don't renew our streets that often. The final stage is having a plan with a real budget and realistic staffing. Brookline doesn't have a bicycle planner. Most cities our size, if they were serious, would have somebody whose responsibility is checking out the bike network and working on projects to make that bike network happen. And this is what you do when your perceived constituency is Bicycling is normal people. Bicycling is my kids and my neighbors' kids and everybody's kids. We need to make this place safe for everybody to ride. So that's the end of what I want to present. I'm glad to answer your questions. I hope Brookline will move quickly through the 5 stages with Cambridge has, and the rest of us are trying to catch up.
Well, there are several questions that are in the chat, which I will relay to you, but I do have one of my own, which
Okay.
has to do with the fact that we have this thing here called winter.
Yes.
Which includes some fairly, can include weeks, maybe even months
Yes.
of snow and ice on the roadways. And I'm just wondering if there are ways to make that compatible with bicycling, or is that?
Yes, sure. That's a great question. So if there's ice on the roads, we're going to have crashes and deaths all over the place because cars slip on ice too. So, and we know that. And we actually do an incredibly good job of clearing our roads from snow and ice. I've been bicycling in Boston in the winter for 40 years. I fell once because I slipped and fell once because it was snowing as I rode. But my experience in Boston is if it snows on Wednesday, by Thursday, the roads are clear. And the DCR is doing just about the same thing on some paths. If there's advocacy, so they're doing it on the Southwest Corridor. I think they do it on the Charles River. So the snow is just no problem. During the winter we had with 100 inches of snow, some days there was so much snow, school was closed. Those days, okay, I didn't ride. If school was open, everything was clear, and I rode every day. The other thing is cold, and you just put on the right clothing. I've got 3 sets of overpants to put on. I got my windbreaker pants. That's for when it's below 22 degrees. I've got my rain pants. That's for when it's raining. And if it's below 10 degrees, I put on my snow pants. No problem.
Okay, so the answer is in part, you've got to have the gear to go with it as well, right?
Yeah, you got to have the right clothing, but the clearing of the snow and the ice, our cities do a great job with that. They take care of it.
Okay, well, we have a question here about shared lanes.
Yeah.
And another one which is sort of related about putting bike lanes in the middle, like some avenues in New York City and Washington, D.C.
Oh, well, those are 2 very different things. So the bike lanes in the middle, that's what the bridle path, the Beacon Street bridle path is all about. We've got this wide median there. It's got the Green Line tracks, of course, but it's got room for a lot more than that. And if the bridle path goes through, that will mean a bike path in the middle of the road. Pennsylvania Avenue has bike lanes in the middle. And there's some streets, some boulevards in Brussels that have that. It's not too common in the world, but yeah, that'll be great. The MBTA is very concerned about not having cars not crashing into the Green Line, and so the intersections were designed and the signal plans are designed so that hardly any cars can come and hit the Green Line. Well, the same thing is going to really help the bicyclists because they'll be right parallel to the Green Line, and they'll have a green when the Green Line has a green. Now, the question about shared lanes, let's see if I can find that question.
It just says, do you consider shared lanes as part of the current network?
Well, so shared, here's one thing. I make a distinction between shared lanes and shared roads. If a road has lanes, actually has lines dividing it into lanes, then no, forget it. Because as soon as there are lines on the road that say, cars, this is where you belong, when there's a bike in front, that bike is blocking me, move out of my way. But if I've got a quiet local street, there's no lines, bikes and cars share it, we do just fine, because most of the time, if when a car encounters a bike, it's just one car, and they pass you with a wide space, they say hello, everything's fine. So a shared road, it works fine if it's like a local street with low traffic and low volume. But sometimes people try to take that concept and force it onto a street where there's a lot of traffic. It never works.
Okay, different question. How do we prevent rideshare companies from parking in the bike lane? The person says, I bike to the seaport a few times a week, and the rideshare companies are incredibly problematic.
I wonder if you mean the vans of the rideshare companies who are, let's say, adding bikes to a station or removing bikes, or do you mean people are actually parking their bikes in the bike lanes?
I cannot.
Anyway, the rideshare company, if it's their vehicles, they're a contractor, and the city can tell them to do whatever they want. The city, and they got to listen, because they're a contractor. If it's individuals parking their bikes there, when individuals are doing the wrong thing, the main thing to look for is make it easy for them to do the right thing. Give them a safe, simple, easy place to park their bike where you want them to park it. A nice rack or whatever's needed, and usually they will.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I don't have I'm sorry I couldn't make that clearer. And then the next question is, does the town have a landing page? In other words, I think online somewhere, the Green Routes plan. Do you know if the town has in some place on the town's website bicycling information that would include the Green Routes plan?
I don't. I found it by Googling Brookline Green Routes, and I don't know what the structure of, so maybe somebody else does. I don't know what the structure of the
Okay.
The plan.
Then I think the answer is explore the town's website.
I put the link in the chat.
Oh, somebody has answered that question.
Yeah, you Google Brookline Green Routes and bingo, it's there. So it's
okay. There is a link in the
easy
chat
to
for
find.
anybody who wants to know the answer to that question.
Thanks.
I can post it later, but I can't do it right now. And then there's a question about the alternative to two-wheeled manual bikes. How about elderly and fitness? And what are their options for different kinds of bikes based on the people who have special needs, who could ride in a bike lane? Do such exist?
Yeah. So people who have lost the use of their legs, you can get hand-wheeled bikes. Now, if you still have the use of your legs are much stronger. Sometimes the difficulties with balance. So then we can get adult tricycles. And then there are e-bikes. And I should say I ran into a woman who was, a good deal older than me, riding her adult tricycle when I was visiting the Amish country in Ohio. Some Amish won't ride bicycles like those in Pennsylvania, but the Amish of Ohio, bicycles have always been okay for them. And so now some of them are riding on three-wheeled bikes. And then electric assist bikes are a real boon to people who are losing some strength, still have a sense of balance, because you push fast enough to go 6 miles an hour and it makes you go 10 miles an hour, 12 miles an hour. It's fantastic. So I've got a few friends with disabilities who, can't walk more than a few blocks and then they just tire out. Can't ride a regular bike because of degenerative disease, but they're able to get all over on their e-bike. So in a sense, it's their assist vehicle.
There's a more detailed approach to the question about lanes in the middle, because it was directed to, I guess, the study you were part of about Clyde Road and whether or not there could be bicycle lanes in the middle of Clyde Road. Can you connect that?
I suppose, but bicycle lanes in the middle where I've seen them are done either because there's a wide median, and so you just put them in that median, or because there's such intensive use of the curb. That's the case in Washington, D.C. on Pennsylvania Avenue. All the tour buses on the curb. Any bike lane that would be on the curb, I mean, it'd just be a disaster. So that's how they came up with the solution of the bike lane in the middle. So for Lee and Clyde, there's not much action going on the side. So and there's a normal hierarchy of speed. People don't want to be in the middle surrounded by fast moving cars. So if I if I saw the plan, maybe I'd see something in it that I haven't thought of now. But it seems to me, bike lanes on the side would be better. The plan that my students and I came up with was this carriage road plan, in which we said one lane in each direction for the through traffic, then a median, a barrier, and then we have a carriage road, which would only be used for local traffic, people getting in and out of the driveways, because the homes are almost all on the east side, and then bikes could ride in that carriage road. And you see that kind of design a lot on Dutch roads.
And to clarify the matter of the vehicles that were blocking, they're talking about Uber and Lyft.
Oh yeah, Uber and Lyft blocking bike lanes. That's the story we all know. That's one of the reasons we need protected bike lanes. Protected bike lanes protect you from, well, they keep cars out. So an unprotected bike lane, a regular bike lane with stripes, is effective only to the extent that it is a reliably car-free space. So there are places like that where there just is no reason any car would get in that bike lane. But you go into a commercial area, you go near a downtown, everybody wants to be near the curb. I'm just Ubers and Lyfts, somebody who's dropping they're off a friend, somebody's running into a store. So that's why in those areas, conventional bike lanes, they just don't work. One of my students did a study once of 3 commercial areas in Greater Boston. One was in Brookline, St. Mary's. One was in Brighton or Alston, Packards Corner. One was in Cambridge, Central Square. At the time, in all places, there were regular conventional bike lanes. They followed bicyclists for a couple hours. They found that 45% of the bicyclists had to leave the bike lane because it was blocked. Now, if I tell you, oh, I got a great safe place for you to ride, there's a 45% chance or 50% chance you'll actually be it'll be open for you. That's a joke.
I think what you're saying, and I think I'm particularly aware of this for all kinds of reasons, is enforcement is literally what's missing here.
No, enforcement is impossible. These are people, they're there for a minute and then they're gone. So the only way enforcement could work is if you had a police officer on every block, and it's 2 or 3 police officers per block. It's unenforceable. So it has to be self-enforcing. So that's why we need what we call a protected, a protected lane where there's a barrier. It's
right. You need a barrier, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there's a curb, exactly.
Right. Okay. So I think there's one more question about vehicle encroachment, but it's basically what you've just been talking about.
Okay.
And given that we're about to be at 8 p.m., which is our planned time for adjournment, I want to thank David Krupp, who has invited many of the members, but he's also, just for everybody's information, there is a bicycling advocacy group in Brookline called Biking Brookline. The website has a page with links to all town documents relating to bicycling. And if the people who have joined us look at the chat, there is a link in the chat so that you could follow up on David's information and track down whatever there is on the town's website. And I'm also going to just say that there's another comment. which is thank you for the PDF. It shows most of inbound Beacon Street is high stress and shallow, sadly, which is an observation. And I see another comment. What are your thoughts on using part of the Brookline Municipal Golf Course to complete a bicycle network in South Brookline? Peter, if you can address that one, you may. The
Oh,
bicycle
bike lane through the municipal golf course, bike path, I should say.
path, probably, yeah, bike
path.
path.
A bike path, that would be marvelous. I mean, this is public land that's basically only accessible to people who will pay a pretty steep fee. It would be great to have some of that land accessible for people to go on bike rides, to go on and to get places. So it would be that's a really clever, innovative way of using your space. I'm pretty sure it could be done without at all detracting from the main purpose of the golf course, which is to provide golf. So it's a great idea. Now, if it's not going to be lit, and I imagine something like that wouldn't be lit, then we'd also still want to pursue bike lanes on the parallel roads. But that's you can, by all means, let's have both, because when I want an enjoyable bike ride, I want to ride through the park.
Okay, and then there is somebody who's commented, and I don't know that you need to follow up on this, that a person says, I've cycled all over the world. There are much cheaper and more effective ways to segregate cycling from car traffic than having to build bike lanes above the road. And I think that was really thinking more about the separated lanes that were referred to.
Yeah. Well, American cities have come up with an invention and innovation that is really inexpensive, which is flex posts.
What?
And using parked cars. Parked cars cost nothing, cost the city nothing. So cities have been incredibly inventive. When cities in the US started using flex posts to separate the bike lane, I wondered, is this really going to work? But after a few months, I said, really, it works. When you are riding with flex posts separating you from the car traffic, you really relax. This is a reliably car-free space. It's true, they wouldn't protect you if a car was out of control, but then neither would a curb when you're walking on a sidewalk. And we all walk on sidewalks without fear that a car, it happens one in a million times, but we walk pretty much without fear that a car is going to go out of control and hit us. So we found a very inexpensive way of doing it. But for the long-term maintenance, when we have to rebuild a road, it's worth it to rebuild, move the curbs to where they belong and put the bikes up there. Now, I don't, that's.
Well, I'm just going to put in, I think it's important for everybody who, whether you're walking or bicycling or frankly driving a vehicle, it's very important to be respectful and thoughtful of the other people. I personally am more of a walker and oftentimes find myself wondering whether I'm safe where I'm walking in places that also include bicycling. So it's a multifaceted matter of people trying to be thoughtful and respectful of others. And I think—
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Betsy. And the design should also reflect that. So that's why in the Netherlands, the bike path is always physically separate from the walking path. So you've got, there's a place to walk.
Right.
And now that's not true in rural areas because there aren't so many people walking, and there the walkers and the cyclists can share a path. But in the cities, there's a walking path, there's a bicycling path, there's a driving path.
Yeah, and in fairness, in Amsterdam anyway, the vehicles are bicycles. Cars hardly exist at all.
Yeah.
So.
And I was just there this summer, Betsy, and they have finally made some long needed changes, hugely expanding the bike paths, taking space from the road. because the bikes and make so the bike traffic is better organized, especially around the train station. It's a lot better now.
Well, maybe we're going in the right direction. We obviously have some distance yet to cycle, folks. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. This has been a very interesting and I think informative and somewhat challenging discussion. But I hope that bicyclists will begin to have a stronger role, a stronger voice, and to be able to influence the way our transportation system in Brookline is being planned. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you again at our next event. Good night.